Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first Audit Committee of 2024. Do we have any apologies, Brian?
We have no apologies, Convener. Thank you.
Do we have any declarations of interest? No? Okie dokie. Then the last minutes, is there anyone wish to raise, or are we agree they're a true record?
Happy to agree, Convener.
Do you have a seconder?
Agreed.
Agreed. Do we have any matters arising? No? Okay, then I move on to the rolling action log.
Apologies, Convener. There are two items on the rolling action log relating to the Legionella compliance update that we had at the last meeting. You'll see that a report was requested, including timescales for all actions, and that's on today's agenda. And the committee also asked for a property compliance report 6 months from the February meeting from today. So that's on the rolling action log to be brought to the committee in September this year. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Then we'll go to the first item. Apologies, Councillor Spears.
Yeah, regarding the Legionella report on the rolling action log, I believe there was also indicated we needed a statement of reasons for why Legionella testing hadn't been carried out, especially in schools and senior citizens' homes. As we know, that's part of government legislation. And will this be included in the future report?
Paul.
I wasn't aware of the requirement to provide that statement of reasons, but I think, as we highlighted in the previous report, Legionella testing has been getting undertaken. Actions have been being implemented, however, they were not being recorded in many instances, and that was where the primary failing was. But clearly this update report is to highlight the work that's been ongoing to provide a greater level of assurance.
Can I ask then why no reasons and statements were recorded? We need to know the reasons why they were never recorded.
It was prior to my tenure here at the council, and I would be unable to comment on that.
So who would be best to get a comment from?
It would be predecessor officers that have subsequently left the employment of the council.
I think maybe it's probably not too relevant for the rolling action log. I take Councillor Spears' point. I think we've had the internal report which highlighted the issues and whatever reasons that it wasn't recorded. For this committee, we've asked for what's going to happen next. Where are we taking this forward rather than needing to look back? So I think in terms of rolling action log, what's on there is fine. And I think we can pick up any of the sort of compliance issues possibly and we come to the Legionella report. But as Mr. Kettrick said, it's things weren't recorded, that new systems have been put in place, and they've now got an action plan to move on from that. So I think probably at this point, Convener, it's just appropriate just to move on to the substantial reports.
Thank you. I think the importance, Councillor Spears, is that we've had lessons learned from it. And that's the main objective, so that we are now moving forward with it. Okay, moving to item 5. Can we hear the report, please?
Thanks, Convener. Good morning, everybody. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the mid-year actions which were set out within the annual governance statement, or the AGS as we call it, action plan. The AGS last year, which was part of the 22-23 annual accounts, included an action plan. It was agreed at Executive in May 23 that the action plan would be reviewed to monitor progress. Paragraphs 4.1 and 4.2 summarise this. This work also feeds into this year's AGS as part of the 2023-24 annual accounts. Appendix 1 summarises the position with each action. Paragraphs 5.1 and 5.2 set out the progress and highlights there are no significant issues to bring to the Audit Committee's attention. These updates have been provided by lead officers in each area based on their progress updates on the Corporate Risk Register and the quarterly risk assurance statements. To finish, I ask members to note the recommendations and conclusions. That is, that members are asked to note progress with planned actions and to seek further assurance from or ask questions of Chief Officers on progress with the mid-year annual governance statement action plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Convener. I was just going to ask a wee bit in relation to the corporate risk leadership decision making and governance, particularly around the corporate governance. I just wondered if the Chief Executive and Directors were content with the annual assurance statements and will confirm that the Code of Conduct's been addressed across the piece.
Chief Exec.
Yes, thank you, Convener. Sorry, I was just trying to find the relevant page in the.
Sorry, it's page 18.
Page 18.
Apologies.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, you'll notice that the assurance level last year was marked as limited, and our assurance level in December is also marked as limited. But I think if you look at the actions in the right-hand column, the progress against the actions in the right-hand column, we have made, I think, significant progress across all of these. I think the agreement of both the Code of Conduct and including that section on gifts and hospitality, you specifically mentioned the Code of Conduct. I think that's a really important step forward for us, and also in relation to risk management, we've got to a position where I think we've simplified the system better, and it's more functional and more useful for us, both as chief officers and I hope as members as well. So it feels to me that progress is good. The assurance level, as I said, is still limited, but we do expect it to be substantial by the end of the financial year. And I think the action set out, assuming we continue to make the progress we are making, will get us to that position.
Thank you. The other question I had, Convener, was in relation to the major capital development programmes and the assurance level on the risk register, just taking cognizance of the challenges around capital and the delivery on projects going forward. Don't know who would be best to answer that.
Amanda?
I think I'm looking at page 22 of the agenda, where we've talked about it to be confirmed, and part of that is around, in June we were expecting the Strategic Asset Modernisation Board to review the programme risk registers. Those programme risk registers have been prepared for each class of assets, and there's been a lot of work happening to sort of embed that process into the regular meetings of the Strategic Asset Modernisation Board. And then we also have the risk registers that are sitting alongside all the major projects. I think we're sort of recognising that there's a lot of work to do to ensure that Invest Falkirk are fully resourced up to be able to take all of those projects forward, and there has been work underway to resource those teams, and so I think what we've kind of recognised and is that, you know, these projects are sort of hugely important in helping, you know, because of the challenges with capital funding, really working in partnership for these large scale projects is important to try and bring investment into the area, but without a sort of heavy hit on our revenue budget because of the affordability issues. So I think that's one where we've said that it's to be confirmed in March in terms of the risk itself, but there has been a lot of work in progress happening in that area. I'm not sure if
Could I maybe just ask Isabel whether she thinks that that is the right approach, and whether or not that would take us to a substantial assurance, or to whether there still would be some anxieties around that?
Yeah, of course. I think the
Isabel, we can't
issue is
hear you.
around- Oh,
That's it. Can you?
sorry, it was
Yeah.
just a wee bit of lag there. I think the issue is around the risk registers being completed, and I think once all the project risk registers are in place and the risk coordinator is able to see those, I think that's exactly where we'll need to be. So yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, convener. I just wanted to check on page 24. There's reference to the corporate risk financial sustainability, easy for you to say. The assurance level is limited, and noted that it will be maintained until savings are agreed and implemented. Now, there's more than just the question of savings in terms of financial sustainability. There's income as well as outgoings. Is the Chief Executive satisfied that we will be able to, the Council will be able to make the budget savings to meet the financial strategy, given Scottish Government changes in decision recently?
Mr. Lorry.
Thank you, convener. Thank you, Councillor Hannah. I don't think satisfied would be the right word for me to choose. I mean, there are clear routes for us through to financial sustainability, but they involve difficult decisions for elected members round about council tax, round about service savings, and round about fees and charges as well. So, as you know, we've emphasised both in the financial strategy and various briefings we've had with members in the run-up to next week's budget, we've got a fair distance to go in terms of achieving a position of financial sustainability. And clearly, any restrictions placed upon us through the government, be that in relation to, for example, teacher numbers or the Learning Week or council tax, these are things that perhaps increase the challenge, but there is a route through to financial sustainability if members are prepared to take the kind of challenging decisions which I think you're all aware of in terms of savings, council tax, and indeed fees and charges as well.
Councillor
Thank
Hannah.
you. Thank you.
Councillor Forrest.
Thank you, convener. Page 22, referring to the corporate risk, climate change. The assurance level has been moved from none to limited. Is this the only result of the executive agreement to the revised CEAP? I think that will go to Isabel.
Isabel.
It's moved from none to limited. Yes, it was changed when that was agreed. The main reason for the change was that previously we'd not expected to meet those targets, but now there's a mixed rating, so we're expecting that we will be able to make one of the targets, which I think is the national target of 70% reduction by 2030. Thanks.
Thank you for that. One other question, and it's this time will be for the Chief Executive. Are you satisfied that funding and projects will be put in place to meet the Council's climate change ambitions?
Well, I think now that we have our action plan in place, that enhances our position. But ultimately, if we're going to put funding into climate change. I suppose I'm particularly thinking about capital in terms of some of the projects we may wish to take forward. Again, that takes us into the territory of difficult decisions, because if we're funding climate change, then we're not funding other things. And ultimately, as officers, we'll bring forward the proposals in the context of the Climate Change Action Plan and the budget. But there will be challenging decisions, I think, in terms of whether we go focus particularly on climate change or whether other issues take precedence. But members will be put in a position whereby these decisions can be taken in the context of the wider budget position.
Thank you for that. Difficult decisions ahead. Thank you.
Councillor Spears.
Thank you. A question for the Chief Executive regarding the budget meeting ahead. Will we be given the pros and cons whether we accept the council tax freeze as suggested by the Scottish Government?
Well, I'm not going to say too much about a report which isn't yet in the public domain. That will be very soon, but certainly will both of these options will be considered in the report, and there'll be plenty of information both in the budget report and I think in reports we brought forward over the period of the last year or so for members to be in a strong position to make that make a judgment about how they wish to take that forward.
Okay, I have one very simple question, and that's regarding the equalities duties. Now we've got an equalities officer. Are we likely to have regular training provided going forward? Karen? Sorry.
Thank you, Convener. Yep, have to pick up on that. So our equalities officer since starting has developed a very detailed action plan of things that we need to do. And one of them was training. The action plan was considered by corporate management team just a week or so ago. That was agreed, and it's now mandatory training that will be put in place for all relevant officers. But that is only one of the activities, and there's a range of work getting done beyond that, including a review of our EBIE process and a number of other actions that the officer will take forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. Do we have any other questions? No. Then can I formally move that motion, that item?
Agreed.
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 Okay, if we go to item 6 on the agenda, I believe it's Isabel to present.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on where we are with completing our 2023-24 internal audit plan. The plan was agreed by committee in April 2023. Paragraph 3.2 sets out the workload, including the other client work that's been undertaken. A summary of progress relating to the 23 assignment areas is at Appendix 1. Paragraph 3.3 summarises what audit reports have been completed, what's in progress, and what's still to be started. Appendix 2 summarises the findings arising from the assignments that have been finalised via an internal audit report since I last reported to Audit Committee, with paragraph 3.5 highlighting that there has been a vacancy within the internal audit team, which has impacted on audit delivery. On a quarterly basis, internal audit identify what look like duplicate creditor payments. We then investigate those payments to look to see if there are any overpayments. The last quarter results can be seen at paragraph 3.6. I'd ask members to note the recommendations and the conclusions, that is, that the team are making reasonable progress with completing the 2023-24 internal audit plan, albeit a vacancy has impacted on audit delivery. Members should also note the actions taken regarding duplicate creditor payments. Thank you. So happy to try and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Isabel. Councillor Meikle-John?
Thank you. A couple of questions. First one might be the easier one, not sure, is really around the workforce. Obviously, there has been some challenges and flux within the team, and that continues to be. We can't prevent people from moving on, obviously, they need to be in a position to make their own choices. However, do you anticipate that that will cause any significant impact on the timescales in delivering on our audit, and whether or not that will impact on our arrangements with external contracts, such as with Clip Manager Council?
Yes, so I think there's probably two parts there. So in terms of impacts on timescales, unfortunately, yes, there's got to be some impact on the timescales for getting some of that work done. And you're completely right that can't stop people moving on. We have been fortunate to fill the vacancy quite quickly, because we were quick off the mark in putting an advert out, and we're really delighted to be in the position of having someone start in the next couple of weeks. So, and it's someone coming into the team again who has some experience, who, you know, maybe wouldn't take as long as someone who's coming in with no experience, obviously. So yes, there will be an impact on timescales. It probably is a good point to say that none of the work won't be done. Everything that's in the plan will be completed. It just is going to take a bit longer. Now, it means that there may be a bit of dovetailing with the 24-25 plan, because it'll be another couple of months at the next audit committee where that plan will come, and it may be that a couple of those audits will have to be deferred into that programme just to keep it running, and so that we're not running with the two programmes more or less at the same time. But I would like to give assurance that everything on the plan will be completed. It may just take a bit longer. And because we have that person starting, we're hoping that it won't be as long a delay as initially thought. The second part to that question was about impacts around the other work that we do for Clip Manager Council was mentioned there. So the work we do for Clip Manager Council, we do provide a resource for that from Falkirk Council. So it's the equivalent of a full-time person, but that full-time person can be made up of anyone in the team or numerous people in the team at various points throughout the year. And again, we are committed to making sure that their audit programme of work is completed as well. So yes, there may be the same delay to their work, but we're not anticipating, for the reasons given already, that that's going to be a really big delay. It's just more about trying to prioritise what we've got and thinking the best way to, you know, with a new person starting, where would be the best audits for them to start. I think I rambled a wee bit on there, but you'll get the gist.
Okay, thank you for that. The other question I had was in relation to page 35 and the procurement and housing property support and follow-up. It was really just to get a wee bit more assurance around how we monitor and oversee contractors to ensure that we do get best value around price, but also around quality, and where we measure where there is customer dissatisfaction. Now, this is something that wouldn't necessarily just solely around procurement around housing property support, but in general across the council is about making sure that we do get best value for all the contracts that we let to our including the subcontractors going forward.
Karen, could you?
I'm happy to say that there was a lot of work done within BMD, but I don't know if Malcolm wants to come in this one rather than myself.
Malcolm, do you wish to reply?
Yeah, thank you. I don't have any sort of concrete information to provide on that answer. I think it's best if I speak to the service themselves and get the detail. In terms of procurement, I think we've got you know, professional channels to let contracts, and get the best price, and then it's down to us managing it. You'll recall that we brought a report on BMD to the scrutiny committee before Christmas, in which we highlighted that there were a number of challenges within the service, and that included issues with the lack of management capacity, and that when you have a lack of management capacity, that means it's more challenging to manage the contracts. We've got a recruitment drive ongoing at the moment to make sure that the management team is repopulated. And once we're in that place, I think we can manage the contracts. So to return to the original question, my assessment would be that the contracts that we let are the best value, and then it's down to managing those. And moving forward, we can do that with a larger management team. Taking the point that you make about customer satisfaction, and that is important. I can't claim to have a full understanding of how that directly influences the management of those contracts, and I'm happy to get you information on that.
Thank you, Convener. Perhaps at some point maybe an update report in relation to that to look at the progress that's been made.
Councillor Hannah?
Thank you, Convener. In page 37, referring to the review of sickness absence management, the report states that the policies and training and whatnot are all in place and have substantial assurance, but that compliance at service level is limited. I wonder if there's any clarity about why this is the case and what actions are being taken and could be taken to improve the level of compliance at service level.
Karen?
Yes, thank you, Convener. Prior to this report being published, Convener, we became aware of the sickness absence levels on the increase. Now, I think it's worth just saying for committee's information that sickness absence is increasing across the board in all councils across Scotland, so it's not unique to us. But that doesn't detract from the fact that we need to do our best to help manage this and do whatever we can to support employees and ensure that they attend work. So there was a report considered by a corporate management team, I think it was November, but certainly prior to Christmas, around a number of actions that we would take. And the actions, whilst this audit report wasn't at that stage finalised, we did have some information from it, and the actions absolutely support what we need to do to try and reduce sickness absence levels. Now, one of those actions was to appoint some temporary additional support within our human resources team to help support managers in the management of absence and to ensure that we then have the right support mechanisms in place through occupational health and other services such as counselling services, where we've made no changes to the contracts here, we've kept them as they are to be able to support employees. There's also some training getting looked at and a number of different activities that will help just manage that process, because as you say, Councillor Hannah, the policies, the procedures are there to be followed, but what we needed to do was put in additional support to help managers actually manage through that process, and that's the steps that we're now taking. So I hope that helps address the question. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Patrick?
Yes, just a couple of points, but perhaps picking up on that. I mean, when we do look at the figure, page 37, top left, where this absence is costing the council about 10.69 million. I mean, that when we consider the savings that we've been asked to make of £10,000 here or a couple of 100,000 there, I mean, it's such a massive amount, and that must really, if we can pull that down, that's going to make a great difference to our budgetary difficulties, perhaps. So it really is, I think, a very important area. I also wanted to pick up on the purchase card arrangements report. That's on page 36. Again, it's a limited assurance, and I can see there's quite a few procedures getting put in place to either change how things are done or make things, I think, better. I wanted just to check. It talks about the credit limits and the need for transaction limits off 999 million, in fact, 99999. Is that a typo, or is that, you know, what is the limit, in other words? Because that can't surely be the limit on these cards.
Yeah, those were the limits that were found on the cards. Yeah,
Nearly 10 million, basically. Let's say. So, and as a consideration, so that's just been reviewed just now to see what that might be in future. Or has a decision been made yet on what that might be?
I'm not sure what the latest situation with it is. All I can say is that with the purchase cards, there were those 12 recommendations made. The dates for the implementation of the recommendations ranged from the end of December up until the end of February. So they have a bit of time to work with those recommendations, and when recommendations are agreed, those dates come back from the officers responsible, so they are working out what they think is feasible and setting those dates. So what will happen in the future, if those recommendations remain outstanding, haven't been actioned or completed, they will work their way back onto a report for yourselves, and they'll come back to audit committee as an outstanding recommendation. So a piece of work, an audit action that hasn't been implemented yet. So that's where you would find out if those actions hadn't been taken.
Thank you.
Amanda?
Just to give you a little bit of reassurance, there is actually an overall limit on how much we can put through our purchase card. We set that limit with the Royal Bank of Scotland. So I think at the time of the review, the limit was 6.5 million in total. So we couldn't have transactions beyond that level with the Royal Bank of Scotland. Now we've been talking about increasing that a little bit. So that maybe the total limit that Royal Bank of Scotland would allow us to have on the purchase card at any one time would be about 11 million. So I appreciate your question was about individual transactions, but it was just to say there are restrictions on our transactions that we organise through Royal Bank of Scotland directly.
Is there any other questions? No. Still Laurie.
Just briefly, it was in relation to Councillor Patrick's point about sickness absence, and the cost of sickness absence is clearly a matter we need to focus on. What I would say is that how the cost of that is particularly acute in relation to areas where we need to bring in alternative workforce to carry out necessary functions. So in some parts of the council, we simply deal with the lesser number of staff we have or employees we have as a result of sickness absence. But there's a real issue in areas we need to bring in agency or other staff to cover that. So it is a really important area for our focus, and it's something we're now looking at a quarterly basis at CMT just to ensure we're on top of the issue.
Councillor Spears?
Yeah, it's regarding sickness absence. The Chief Executive has maybe answered that, but on page 37, it states that there were several errors in relation to the recording of sickness absence details, and that there had been omissions from my view. Can you further expand why these errors have occurred?
Karen?
Thank you, Convener. I don't have the detail of the specific errors. Maybe Isabel has more information, but in essence, the actions will have been taken, but the issue has been that they will not be actually loaded up onto the MyView system where our audit team will expect to see them. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because one of the actions that has flowed from the internal audit report is to ensure managers and remind managers to ensure that all of the paperwork relating to a particular absence is loaded up onto the MyView system on an employee's file to ensure that we have an absolute accurate record sitting within the employee's file. So it doesn't need to say the actions were not taken, it's just that they will not be sitting on the system as they should be. And that's the bit that we need to do some work on. The action that's in the audit report is specifically looking at putting in step further guidance for managers and support to ensure that they completely understand how to do that in case there's a misunderstanding about what it is they should be doing with that paperwork. Thanks.
Yeah, you say it doesn't mean to say, but it does mean to say that they haven't been reported, and will this be rectified in future?
Convener, the absence will have been recorded, and if there were any errors picked up by our audit team when they went out where the absence wasn't appropriately recorded for payroll purposes, then that would have been rectified, and I would give committee that assurance. There's a difference between the reporting of the absence for payroll purposes and simply loading the paperwork onto the system, which doesn't affect the payroll itself or the employee sickness record. I don't know if Isabel has anything further to add on that, but that would be my understanding of it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I don't think there is really much to add to that. The errors are just around the recording of the information, not about the actions not being taken. So when you're looking for it to be there, in my view, to get the full picture, the audit trail of what's happened, those dates weren't there. The examples that are listed here have been passed on, and if any action was required to be taken with them, that would have been taken at the time or as part of the recommendations. So I would just like to give some assurance that there's nothing outstanding there that needs still to be actioned.
Does that answer adequately, Councillor Spears?
Well, we are an audit committee, and time will tell when it comes back, when it's audited again.
Thank you. I've only one small question on that. Does HR monitor that system at all?
Convener, I can maybe pick that up. HR do manage the MyView system. And they monitor the payments going through it, etc. They review, they have various different quality assurance processes in place for the payroll part of it to ensure that is all accurate. The HR team do work with managers to ensure the managers understand what it is they need to do. As I said earlier, however, we've recognised that there is, however, some additional capacity needed in there to help us better manage that absence. And as has been referred to, given the cost of absence, it was felt that that capacity was warranted, even though it results in additional spend. But when you look at the cost of absence compared to that spend of appointing an additional officer to support absence, it's a spend to save to try and make sure that we manage this, and we're absolutely on top of this. So that's where the additional resource has gone in, and that resource will be working with managers to make sure that we manage this appropriately. That was a decision of CMT, and it's particularly picking up on the point of how we manage the cost of absence and keep on top of that as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. Do we have any other questions? Brian.
So definitely not a question, just anticipating the committee's decision. There was a question during this about the procurement and housing property support follow-up, and I think Councillor Meikle-John asked if the director would provide a report. I'm just wondering whether, given that there is a report going to the executive shortly on BND, and then scrutiny committee are already going to follow up the implementation of the recommendations from that report after 6 months, whether the audit committee are satisfied just to let that happen and then come back whether they need to, or whether it's actually asking for a specific report on the improvements and timescales. So I think they're going to get caught up in other reports. It's just to try and avoid busy directors and officers having to write multiple reports.
I'd be happy that it goes through that process, as long as there's the ability to be able to see the progress and report back at some point that's appropriate. But I'm not asking for work to be duplicated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are we happy to move on to the next item and agree that item?
Happy to agree.
Agreed.
Then if we move on to item 7, and I believe it's Isabel again, sorry, to present the report.
Yeah, sorry, yes, it's me again, but the last one, for me anyway. So thank you again, convener. The purpose of the report is to provide an update on the work of the corporate fraud team up until the 31st of December 2023, including an updated corporate fraud action plan. Paragraph 4.1 sets out the position on a range of documents which provide a framework for fraud-related issues. Paragraph 4.2 sets out the position within the 2 remaining documents. Paragraphs 4.3 and 4.4 highlight the delay in fraud reporting due to resourcing issues within the corporate fraud team. Appendix 1 provides members with the corporate fraud team activity for the year 23-24 up until the 31st of December. At the Audit Committee meeting in November 2022, members agreed the introduction of a corporate fraud action plan with a couple of suggested tweaks. See paragraph 4.6 for more details. These improvements and the progress with the corporate fraud action plan can be seen at Appendix 2. Paragraph 4.7 also summarises the impacts on the workload of the team due to the resourcing issues within the corporate fraud team. I'd finally draw your attention to the recommendation at paragraph 2.1, which is to note progress with updating the code of conduct for members and officers and the gifts and hospitality register. Consider fraud-related performance and the summary of work undertaken within the corporate fraud team to the 31st of December 2023 and note progress with the corporate fraud action plan for 2023-24. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you. I think this was kind of partially referred to earlier as around the issues around resource and being able to manage what we asked the corporate fraud team to do within that resource, considering the challenges. So it's basically, again, what do you anticipate that timescales will be caught up appropriately and the new deadline will be met? What have you learned around the need for the resource and managing that resource within the team? And how are you going to look at the resilience of the team going forward to make sure that that's appropriately managed?
Yeah, I feel like a broken down record a wee bit about the resourcing. It's been a bit, well, more than a bit unfortunate. We had obviously the resourcing issues on the internal audit side, and then we had these specific challenges on the corporate fraud team side. So it was really unfortunate that the things happened all around the same time. We had someone retire from the corporate fraud team, and around the same time someone else in the team was on a long-term sickness absence. So it's been a journey, shall we say, to make sure that all of that work has still been undertaken. And I can provide you with some assurance here that anything that came in that was what we would call a reactive piece of work, so whistleblowing type allegations or something that needed investigated, all of that work has been undertaken and is up to date. So there isn't anyone sitting waiting for responses in that way. Where we have lagged a bit, which you'll see from the report, is on taking forward some of the other pieces of work that we're trying to do. So in trying to establish the corporate fraud team, we have the action plan in place where there are a number of actions that we've been trying to take forward, and where there has obviously been an impact and delay. We have looked at them again. We again have been quite fortunate in that the vacancy has been successfully filled, and again we have someone starting in the next couple of weeks. So again, it's someone who is experienced as a corporate fraud investigator and should be able to integrate to the team very quickly and start taking forward some of this work. In terms of, I think you asked me a wee bit there about resilience and going forward. Obviously, we can never anticipate changes to the team or sickness absence, and it is around being able to prioritise that work around anything that comes our way in that sense. So it's been a bit of taking a pragmatic view as to what can be done practically and what could wait. And you will appreciate that anything investigating whistleblower allegations was the priority and was right to be the priority, and therefore things that are in the action plan around our branding, etc., have just had to wait a little bit longer. That's not to say it won't happen. They will happen. You'll see the dates have been changed. We will have this person starting in the next couple of weeks, and that will be one of their immediate tasks, is in taking some of that forward. And in terms of, I think what was the other bit, lessons learned, I think there's a little bit around some of the work that we do that we maybe could look to do, not differently, but look for streamlining the ways that we do it in terms of the systems that we use. So again, when the new person starts, that's going to be another focus of work for them. Hopefully they're not watching and already getting put off. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel, for that. Absolutely, fully understand, and you're absolutely quite right. And I'm pleased that we are able to prioritise what's most critical. Just wondering, with areas the likes of the branding, etc., there's maybe additional resource from other parts of the service that could be tapped in to be able to help with that, and perhaps take a little bit of the pressure off. So perhaps by reaching out to other areas, that there might be an opportunity there to help build that team resilience as well. Thank you.
Yeah, we actually are working with the communications team on numerous recommendations that you'll see there in the action plan, but unfortunately they've had an absence too, which has impacted on what they've been able to do for us. We have had those discussions, and we jointly are looking to take some of that work forward reasonably quickly once some of their absence issues have resolved as well. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any other questions at all? No. Are we happy to agree that item?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Then can we go on to the final item, item 7, which I have a keen interest in.
Thank you, Convener. The purpose of this report is to update the Audit Committee on the actions undertaken following the previous internal audit that identified no assurance. The internal audit team, as members of the committee will be aware, carried out a review of Legionella water quality management arrangements in respect of the Council's operational properties during February and March 2023, and the review involved a sample of 5 properties. The outcome of this review was no assurance, and this was reported to Audit Committee on the 18th of September. And members of the committee at that stage asked for a further update with timescales and progress being made. This report fulfills that requirement. The key strategic actions are outlined in the report, and these continue to be progressed. We have, for instance, established the Property Compliance Working Group that brings together all services and oversees the management of the Council's property compliance activities. The new property compliance team, which is in the process of being established, with in relation to Legionella, the Council recently employing a dedicated officer. The recruitment of this post was considered a priority to lead on the wider range of actions, and I'm pleased to advise that Thomas Law, who recently joined the Council, is on the call. The initial logbook review has been completed for all schools and is now being progressed for operational buildings, and these identify an extensive area of actions across the estate where we can focus in terms of our premises risk management and compliance activities. Other key actions include risk assessments being undertaken, actions being logged and then followed up. And we now have a new contractor in place to take forward these activities. And we have now commenced training for all premises managers and those involved in the management of Legionella. Within Appendix 1 is the detailed action plan with specific activities and the appropriate timescales. And members of the committee should note that a number of actions are now complete, including updated premises managers handbook and the distribution of guidance and awareness raising of compliance within services. The appendix notes, where applicable, the appropriate timescales for specific actions and identifies a number of actions that are ongoing. And I'm happy to take any questions, Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Convener. I know that others have got questions, but mine was really on what was to come back to committee and after the final action date as a report, and to whether or not there can be a section where we have lessons learned and improvements that can be taken forward included in that, because I think, again, that looks forward. It's taken on board what challenges we've found in this process, but more importantly, looking at making sure that we have a robust process going forward. And I just would like consideration given to that if we are going to have a report that's coming back to committee.
Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. I would say that a number of the actions that are identified do represent those lessons learned, where the failings have been, and the activities that are being put in place are to counteract those issues that have occurred. Happy to provide, as part of our June report, a summary of those sort of thematically. I think we can see from the actions that have been undertaken on Legionella and indeed the wider approach to property compliance, there is a much more rigorous and robust approach being put in place. Will we still encounter challenges going forward? I think definitely it's a huge estate. My experience tells me that. However, we will identify those at the earliest stage, undertake the appropriate actions, and therefore that is the whole purpose of having a robust approach to property compliance, which I'm fairly assured that we are now moving towards.
Councillor Spears.
Thank you. A couple of questions, but my first is, have we found any Legionella? And my second question is on recording. I've looked into this, and it's quite clearly under government legislation laid out, and you can go on the internet and you can download the relevant paperwork. But there's also forms there that you can keep as a register, and we need to make sure that everything's recorded, so that if there is any incidents, that we're in a position to answer that. As we know, there's a couple of big investigations on COVID going on at Westminster and Holyrood, and they will want to check all records, so we need to make sure we're in a position we can provide these. Thank you.
Paul.
Part of the processes that we have established is the undertaking of that Legionella testing and the undertaking of risk assessments, particularly in what would be higher risk type locations. You generally don't identify, if you have that regime in place, Legionella, you may identify changes to levels of bacteria in water, and it's those changes that you want to identify and you want to take the immediate actions. Where there is any doubts in terms of those variations in the bacteria, we would undertake the actions as identified, which include things like chlorination of the system, ensuring that the flushing through is going through. But ultimately, if you have the rigorous processes in place, you're doing that continual flushing through of systems, you are undertaking those regular risk assessments, we should not encounter it.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Spears?
Not really. I asked if we have on record encountered it, especially over at the lockdown period and the start-up period post-lockdown.
I think, as it was widely reported back in August 2020 when the schools were remobilising, that there was a number of issues identified where there had been a lack of sentinel tap flushing through and systems being done, being checked on, but all the remedial actions were obviously undertaken in respect of that. And since then, certainly I'm not aware of any major issues that have occurred other than the ones that were identified within the audit report. But clearly going forward, we're looking to ensure that those situations don't arise.
Thank you, Paul. Does that answer?
I was really wanting to know if there had been any recorded Legionella.
I think we would know, Councillor Spears, if they'd been recorded, because the HSE would have been involved. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Convener. And I think we're all aware, and from the last audit committee meeting, we were made very painfully aware that there have been gaps and errors in the system. And I want to commend Paul and the officers working with him in terms of the action that they have taken to rectify the problems. And welcome to Thomas, who clearly has now come to join us to take it further forward. But one of the things that's referred to is the question of limited buy-in from premises staff. It's referred to on page 56. Since a number of the recommendations have now been actioned, can you assure us that the actions, the recommendations, implementation of those recommendations is actually addressing the problem of limited buy-in for the future? Because like Councillor Meikle-John, I'm concerned about how we move forward with this.
Convener, we've had our first cohort of training of premises managers, and from April we'll be rolling out specific training to all premises managers and those involved in the management of Legionella. We have updated our premises managers handbook that's been disseminated to all premises managers. Services through senior leadership team are well aware of the requirements for premises managers to be quite clear as what their responsibilities are. So whilst there has been in the past pockets of maybe general lack of understanding or perhaps an apathy in relation to the management of property compliance, those are increasingly few and far between, and we'll continue to pick up those challenges, particularly through our logbook reviews. But I'm certainly not seeing any what I would call intentional resistance. I think it's more about awareness training and awareness raising and training that's probably more the issue at the moment.
Councillor Hannah.
That's good to hear, and I look forward to subsequent reports confirming that.
Does anyone else have any questions? Then I'd like to raise a couple of points. Going forward, will the compliance team be monitored to see how they progress as you infill, and that these recommendations are still progressing?
The short answer is yes. It would be our intention as part of our asset management performance reporting. We will include specifically in there compliance information across a range of compliance activities, whether that's Legionella, which is obviously the focus of today, but also things such as asbestos, electrical safety, gas safety, and other aspects of property compliance.
Can I rightly or wrongly assume then that the audit committee will receive reports at periodic times with progress?
We would generally report those into Council Executive as part of our asset performance activities, but I'd be more than happy for once we have that fully embedded to report into the Audit Committee also on that performance.
Thank you. I've just got two more other questions. On page 66, it says you've got an audit, you've created an audit schedule. I just wondered, because obviously quite rightly focus has been on the education. Are community halls and such like going to be included in this audit schedule?
The short answer, convener, is yes, they're included in them. We obviously take a risk-based approach onto the frequency of the audits, and clearly community buildings probably represent a risk because of the low volumes of people that go through. So we have to be absolutely clear that premises managers in those situations are doing those flushing through of systems to make sure that that we have the appropriate risk mitigation measures in place.
Thank you. My final question is, are you able to tell the committee who the contractor that has, or has that not been addressed yet?
We do have a contractor in place, and forgive me, I can't remember their name, but I'm wondering if Thomas on these in week 2, Thomas, if you can remember what their name is.
It's Hertel, I believe.
Yetel.
Hertel. I think they're the incumbent contractor. Basically, it's a continuation of the existing procedures and processes that have been in place up to now. And it does seem that the on-site maintenance regimes have been getting carried out. There's just been big gaps in record keeping, I think, and in oversight with regards to that.
Thank you. My final point leads also into that. Has the contractor qualifications for carrying out these tests? Do you have a copy of them in the handbook? Because they are required by law to be displayed in a handbook.
As part of our audits of, as we've mentioned in the report, all the handbooks are all being checked to ensure that things like that are undertaken. I mean, Hertel, and thanks Thomas for reminding me of their name, I mean, they are a nationally recognised property compliance company.
Thank you. Thank you for answering, Thomas. Forgive my interest, but I'm Legionella certificated myself, so thank you.
Convener, before we finish, if I may, just sorry, another question about the committee's decision. Councillor Meikle-John referred to a report earlier on at the start to do with lessons learned, and I think it hadn't been mentioned by other members of the committee, but I know from the pre-chat that members have that they were minded to ask for a follow-up report. So it noted that the final action is set for 10th of September in the action plan. So looking for a report after then on the completion of the progress report, but also a final column in that report which shows how those actions measure up against internal audit original recommendations, just to get an idea of, so obviously this is a really important piece of work, what internal audit asks for, what the final outcomes are. So that's the report the committee are asking for, and also to contain lessons learned, which I think Paul said is going to be in the programme anyway. So just to confirm, that's what members were asking for.
Yeah, I can confirm that. Certainly, I would think that'd be welcomed, to, if nothing else, to round off where we are.
Perfect.
Thank you, Brian. Is there any further or final questions? And can I request, can we remove the item?
Happy to agree.
Agreed.
Okay, that being the case, then I'm happy to close the meeting. And thank you very much for your attendance. And to the officers, thank you very much for all your hard work. It's very much appreciated. I know sometimes cumbersome these reports can be when it's dry material, but thank you very much. They've been quite comprehensive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.